to another great episode, great city, great month of City Brew Tours Beer Club, CBTBC. It is your host once again, Jonathan, coming to you, bringing you guys amazing beer from an amazing place. Where even though I know we've been dealing with the cold a lot, so a little bit later than usual, we're bringing the heat from Phoenix, Arizona, to get you guys some great beer from great places. And of course, I know some of you may have gotten some mix-ups on some of the inserts. That's perfectly fine. We do still have it online for you. And so we will be enjoying today the Der Amerkikanisch Bierbrauer, the Pilsner from our friends over at Tombstone. And we will be also enjoying the Friday Junior IPA from our friends at Roses by the Stairs. But I'm not just coming to you guys by myself drinking beer, even though I am cracking open this Pilsner because it's one of those days. You gotta have it. It's popping out of the glass. Let's and again, let's enjoy this together. Let's pour it out. Let's look at this beautiful color that we have. Pretty much see-through right there. Nice head on there. And this is just, again, we know we don't need to wait to talk about all the fun facts about, the city, Arizona. But we will be talking about it, and I got some experts with me. And we got some experts that are going to help me answer all the questions that we have. And don't worry, Jonathan, I did not I didn't miss the glass. I know it's my cable there, but I got right in the glass. I thought I was going to. It did pop open quite excessively, which is what you want with one of these styles. Again, nice see-through straw color, nice head, beautiful aroma on it. So for those of you that are cracking open, drinking along, cheers. And that is exactly what I want with a Pilsner. Nice, light, crisp, crushable, that I like to say. But you don't have, as we grew up saying, or listening to, like, reading Rainbow, you don't have to take my word for it. You don't just have to take my word for this. We're gonna get this from the pros, from the experts. So I am actually joined today by both Matt Brown from Tombstone Brewing and from Jordan Ham from Roses by the Stairs. So come on, guys, let's have a beer, let's talk, and let's enjoy it. Let's chat for a little bit. There's Jordan. Matt's coming on. He's coming along. He's the one that it's gonna able to tell us a little bit about this beer. So there he is. There's Matt. But also Jordan, what are you drinking with us right now?
Unfortunately, fortunately for cash flow, but unfortunately for me now, we don't have any more of the Friday Junior available. So I have a hazy IPA from a brewery in California.
That's okay. That's all
Yeah.
right. That's perfect. Um, and Matt, welcome as well. What are you drinking along with the Pilsner with us, or
I've got the Miner's Mild, which
Miner's Mild? Yep,
shows
nice.
up as a backward label for me for some reason, but
I don't know. It's not a backwards beer though, so no, it's a good beer. Again, a really nice style. I know you guys, both of you guys provided us with great beers, great options. Pilsners on both sides, IPAs, but then we also got a little bit of those other styles with the copper lager and then English mild in there as well. But I know, Matt, as talking with with your team about this, I know there's a little bit of a story with its very long name for this specific beer as well. What can you tell me, not just about the Pilsner, but the Der Amerikanische Bierbrauer is not your standard name for a beer in general. So kind of
so
what's the story about this beer? And
so
tell us about yourself.
that's one of a number of beers that has essentially similar branding. So the cans are all sort of gray. They've got the same font, the same colors. So it's our like impossible to market brand, but it's like a beer geek passion thing of ours. So it actually started with a bet that we would recreate Michelob, the original Michelob. So what ended up happening was like 7 years ago, we won a bet that resulted in us making a Michelob, forcing Dark Sky Brewing to do a Michelob clone at our brewery with us, because we really just wanted to recreate the Michelob 1896. And we actually got the USDA yeast for that. So because they had the original slant from Adolphus Busch. So they have the yeast banked at the USDA. So we had our yeast lab step it up. We figured out which farm he got his hops from and then bought the same hops from the same farm, which is pretty wild. We figured out the same yeast. We figured out all sorts of other stuff. And then apparently what Adolphus Busch did is he had his regular Budweiser and his Michelob was his premium brand. So he would tell people, I have a beer for connoisseurs if you want the good stuff. So we named that beer the beer for connoisseurs, and we put it in a can, and nobody knew what it meant, and it didn't sell great, but I liked it. So we just went with it, even though it was a terrible marketing idea. So we just kept making it worse, because what we decided with the next one was we did one called Dreyer's, or what was it? Dreyer's Premium Original, which was Anton Dreyer, which was the guy who brewed the beer that inspired Adolphus Busch, which was an equally unmarketable, impossible to sell beer with a terrible name. And then eventually there was one other in there. And then finally what we did was there's a legendary brewing chemist named Anton Schwartz, who inspired all of the American brewers. He was a German. He came to America and realized that like the quality of barley was poor, but the quality of rice was exceptional. So he wrote this publication. He quickly became the editor. He was a contributing guy, but everybody realized that he was essentially America's finest brewery or finest brewer. And so he started writing. He was the editor of this publication called Der Amerkikanisch Bierbrauer, which means the American brewer. So what we decided to do was we used one of his recipes. So we're using yeast similar, like essentially the same yeast that he would have used. We're using the same floor malted Pilsner malt that he would have used. We're using the sort of flaked rice that he would have recommended because the Pilsner malt wasn't as reliable by the time it got to America back then. And we used the water profiles he wrote about. So we essentially recreated a 100-year-old, well, 120-something-year-old recipe of exactly what we think that his magazine was telling the best American brewers to brew at that point in time. So, and we put it on the same can, gave it the most complicated name possible to make it impossible to sell. But the beer is delicious, so it goes great on tap if you can pronounce it.
Yeah. Now, how does it? Because I know like sometimes if you do it like on Untapped, if you use it, does it actually come out all the way, or does it cut off at some point?
Like on our screens in the tap rooms, the font ends up like the tiniest font you've ever seen.
Because it's got to
So
fit
it's
it in
like,
there. Yeah.
yeah, you've pasted an entire novel at like 1.5 point font.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not the best presentation on Untapped, but
But it's a great beer. It's a
Yeah,
great
yeah.
beer. I will say that, and you can definitely tell that there is kind of that finesse of trying to go back to like that traditional style. And I've talked to other brewers in other places, and they've like tried to recreate different historical styles. And even though this is, like a Czech Pilsner, I guess technically it's a Czech Pilsner, correct? Czech,
You know, it,
German.
yeah, it's such a blurred line at that point because beggars can't be choosers, and you're in the frontier of America at that point, trying to get these old world things done, and it's just so it's. I
Could
would
we
say that it
could we
starts.
call it an American Pilsner?
Um, I
Technically.
mean, of
Why
course we
not?
could. I mean,
We can
call
call it
anything,
whatever. I mean, we're calling
which we
it.
do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say I would think it's probably like we could call it a classic American Pilsner. I mean, it uses rice. It's got Pilsner malt. We're not using any 6 row in this recipe.
Okay.
It uses Czech Saaz hops.
Okay.
But honestly, like I get a little bit of some character to it that for me would be more indicative of almost a German Pils than a Czech.
Yeah.
pills because I don't get like the full sweetness from the yeast. I get more of the Czech Saaz character and less
Mhm.
of like the Czech yeast character.
Yeah,
But
yeah. No, for sure. It is definitely a blend of kind of all those types of pilsners. And I know like I know I'm sure we'll talk about IPAs in just a minute because we're going to drink one in here in a few minutes as well. But kind of like that blur line of what is like an American IPA of like what that's kind of blurred over the past few years, or an IPA in general. And I know that people have been trying to do that with like the Pilsners of, obviously you have your Czech Pilsners, you have your Germans, you have your Italians, and then you have the American, the hazy Pilsner, the unfiltered Pilsner, the New Zealand Pilsner, the hoppy Pilsner. And it's like,
well, we
are
also
those
made
all?
a sub-Saharan West African Pilsner.
Well, there you go. There's another one.
We made that
So,
one up.
yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel
We
like
thought
most of them are, but it's okay.
yeah, we made the beer we dreamed the people of Cameroon would enjoy.
I mean,
Never
that's
been to
not much.
Cameroon, but
That's not much different than, things like the tropical stouts that originated and things like that. Of like, I think they would like this kind of beer. That'd be great. They like the stout in the hot weather. So yeah, no, that's kind of fun that you guys are taking kind of those liberties with it. And I know that Tombstone is not technically, in Phoenix for those that are not familiar with geography, or especially Arizona. But I know you still have, you have your tap room and everything. Which, because a lot of people may not be familiar with the beer scene. And
well, we do
Jordan, you
have one in
can,
Phoenix, so we
yeah,
got a
yeah.
full restaurant. And, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and Jordan, you can jump in with this as well, but I know a lot of people may not be familiar with like the beer scene in Phoenix or in Arizona in general, because in some ways it is a younger beer scene, and it is limited by the desert. That does limit space and things. So kind of what has been the journey of kind of the beer scene coming up over the past few years? And what has that looked like, and how have like both of your journeys separate or and collaborative together, kind of how has that been shaped over the past however many years?
Yeah, and we're only in year 2.5, so I can kind of go through that. I wanted to open saisons, you know, barrel-aged wild sours with local fruit. I had a vision to open with zero IPAs on tap. And that just, by the time you get there, and the amount of people that told me that was such a stupid idea, and they were all right, and I was totally wrong. Um, we are very much a new, still kind of an evolving scene. I know for us, it is hazy IPA is still pretty much king here. Lager sells really well for us, especially in the summer because it is so hot, and even in the winter, it's still beautiful here. So it's
Yeah.
um, our tap room especially is kind of a day drinking, family, dog friendly crowd. So it's hazy IPA and lager all day. Um, Not much dark beer, and then we can sell some West Coast kind of along with it.
Nice. Yeah, and then Matt, I know you guys have been around for going on about 8 years, 9 years now.
Yes,
So
it'll be
yeah. What
it'll
has
be
so
9 years.
how's that looked for you guys of like being, I know we also have in our box featured, we have Santen that's been around for since '07. So they're kind of the old ones on the scene. But you guys are right in the middle. So kind of what's been that journey for you guys too?
Yeah, so it feels now like a mature scene compared to what we encountered in the beginning. Um, when we first started, we launched our flagship's always been hazy. In the beginning, I was the sales guy and delivery driver, and I delivered 16 kegs my first delivery run, and I picked up 9 kegs the next day because they all said nobody's going to drink this IPA. It looks like a Hefeweizen.
Yeah.
And the joke that I always make is like, it's like the thing from Back to the Future where he plays the solo on the guitar and nobody gets it. And he's like, it's too soon, but your kids are going to love it. Right.
Yeah.
Like it's in the first Back to the Future. And that's how it felt. Cause it's like some of those accounts that sent it back are some of our best accounts now. But, when we launched that flagship IPA, you know, Wilderness, which always does everything first. It's like the Simpsons did an episode of South Park, right? Where they keep trying to come up with plot lines, but it's already been like Wilderness has done everything. So they did a hazy before we did, but we were the first one that was trying to get it out to everybody, right? Like Moon Juice was out there, which had some haze to it, but it wasn't like, it wasn't like what came now and what still dominates the market. So it was, I mean, it felt like then that it was like nobody would drink really anything interesting. And the people that wanted the hazies eventually scoffed at the loggers. It felt like we were just building empty houses all the way to the moon, and I was just brewing Pilsner for myself. But yeah, now it feels like the drinkers are more diverse. Like, but generally, like the guiding thing that I can see at least is people that people want to drink stuff that's easy to drink and that has accessible flavors. So it's like hazy IPA, yeah, it looks weird, but it's a low bitterness, tropical, fruity, delicious beer. Sorry for the dogs barking, man.
No, it's all
And
good.
same thing with Pilsners. Like people want to drink stuff that's refreshing. They want beer flavored beer. And if you make it, they'll come. But yeah, so it feels like a mature market to me now. Whereas before it felt like nothing of the sort. It just felt like we were making craft beer for me and hoping we didn't go out of business.
Well, and I feel like that's a bit a journey, especially for any brewer that started right around in that 2014 to 2018 era, as the brewing markets that were a little bit smaller were starting to mature and develop. So like over here in the Northeast, like yeah, there are a lot of breweries. Brooklyn Brewery was around since '96, but then you also had other breweries, Alchemist was launching Heady Topper right around that time, 2014. Whether they're the first hazy IPA, again, that's very debatable. Even they're not like, they're like, we don't want that title. Don't put that on us. But, there's, you have kind of that push that's happening of like, oh yeah, we don't have to recreate Sierra Nevada or Lagunitas or anything. But I've noticed that in that, especially that 2014, 2018, of trying to like find that foothold of there is this new style of a hazy, but why do we want something that's dirty? We don't want a dirty beer, right? So yeah, like how do we push that forward? And so I do have seen talking to so many brewers that sometimes you do kind of have to be like, I like this beer, I'm gonna brew it. But then Jordan, as you said, like you love like I am also a huge Saison fan. I love Saisons, wild ales. They're not really any on the mass market. There are a few, but to your point, like people like a hazy, right? Like people want something that is approachable. It is, you know, if you can still get those wild ales and let them sit for months in the barrels and the foeders, it's fantastic. But trying to do just that is a very difficult process. So I think that that's cool to kind of see that developing of, people are also now that there are so many options of breweries and beer styles and education on beer. I think that's where, you guys can have those pilsners and the hazies and the sours and everything kind of hitting all those different areas and sectors of the styles. Do you guys either of you, do you guys ever try to, because obviously it gets really hot in Arizona, so like you're probably not doing imperial milk stouts in like July. But is there a
Totally do that.
market? Oh, you do. Oh, you do that. Okay, never
Oh
mind.
yeah, 100%.
I was
We
gonna
do
say
we do barrel age releases all July. What we find is it actually doesn't matter. Like
oh,
the people that like those beers. This it's we're not like sort of that like mid-Atlantic thing where you might not have air conditioning. Everybody's got air conditioning here.
yeah.
So like you can crank your house down to 55 and enjoy that barrel aged stout. And we find that like most summers we release several barrel aged beers because that's when we see a lot of the biggest tourist traffic in Tombstone.
Okay.
And Pheonix it might not sell as well, but people come to Tombstone and they're ready to spend to bring something back from Tombstone. And if we don't have interesting barrel aged beers, that's just a missed sale. So yeah, normally what we do is we do a pretty big barrel release sometime in the winter, and then a pretty sizable one in July as well.
Nice. And Jordan, do you guys do stouts all year round as well, or?
We do not do barrel aged releases in the summer. No, but I do agree that that crowd here is they'll drink it no matter what. I agree they especially with a local brewery that makes great stuff like they do at Tombstone, that is accessible. You can just go buy it at a store. For the most part, you don't need to be kind of a member of a club to get their stuff, which is super cool. No, summer for summer for us, we pivot a lot into Berliner Weiss, Goza, stuff like that. West Coast pills, things that are crispy and hoppy for the people for the tap room. Yeah, lime lager, things like that. We have a big barrel aged stout release coming up this weekend, but it's not for the first 2.5 years. It's not something we've done very often, but we are trying to get into it. We've added some really great brewers, so we have some time to do that now.
Nice. And with how large is the beer scene in like the Phoenix, Tombstone area? Like roughly how many breweries are there altogether? Do you guys know?
Oh,
I mean,
um, Matt, do you have a number? I'm guessing. I think the state of Arizona is about 90 to 100.
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I understand
So
as well.
yeah, so it's small, right? I mean, even though
Yeah.
Arizona itself is a big state, but again, most of it's desert. So there's that.
Sure.
And then I know like even like Arizona, Phoenix itself is actually one of the largest like capital cities, like per capita. But also like, but with if you only have like 100 brews, then that's as opposed to like
Well,
California, which is.
I like to point out that Tombstone might be the highest number of breweries per capita of any city in the world, because we have 900 people in one brewery. So there's a brewery for
That is true. That's a
that.
very good ratio. I'm
Yeah,
gonna have to steal that one. Actually it might be Tombstone that has
right, right.
the highest brews per capita. I mean everyone always is like, oh yeah, no, Maine has the most brews per capita, but again, they only have like 40 breweries, but it's small, right? It's a little
I mean,
space. Yeah,
Phoenix
yeah,
has what, 5 million people in the metro area. So I
yeah.
mean,
So yeah,
it's
so it
but
literally
it's
is one of
also
the
like
larger.
Phoenix has a really, different culture. Like it's very different doing business in Phoenix than it is in Tombstone. It's very different from Sierra Vista, where our other one is. Phoenix is all atmosphere, vibe, location, parking. Like there's all so many things that like just don't seem to matter at the other breweries. There are the great customers out there, but Phoenix, I mean, you can be in Phoenix and have an hour drive to get to someplace in Phoenix. And I mean, it's a big city,
Yeah,
and yeah, and it's got crazy weather. Like, I mean, it's beautiful most of the year, but like it's definitely it's a totally different animal for us. And it does feel like the beer scene's pretty it doesn't feel like it's saturated like other cities that I've been to, but it also like I think it's a good balance right now. Honestly, I don't know what your experience is, but it feels like it's a healthy scene and that there are the customers out there, but that it's not like a brewery on every corner like some cities feel.
Yeah, I think it's healthy and it is big. I mean, when I say we're the fifth largest city with Philadelphia, and then surrounding Phoenix is Mesa and Chandler and Gilbert and
yeah,
Scottsdale and Glendale and Peoria. There's people everywhere. But Matt's right that there's a lot of people in Mesa, but at rush hour it takes you an hour to get there.
yeah,
So it is a balance of you're kind of a local you're a little bit of a local pub, but then you also have this giant scene that kind of comes down for the weekends.
oh,
Um, if you make good beer, there's definitely room for more good breweries in Phoenix. And the one thing I see, there's five or six, the other five or six best breweries in Phoenix or in the Phoenix surrounding area. They're all opening their second, their third, their fourth, their fifth tap room at this point. So no one's coming from out of state or no one's really sprouting up. And the guys that have been here for a while, they're on to their fifth tap room or so, is what I see
yeah.
happening.
Yeah, I mean Tombstone is also a testament of that. You guys have 3 tap rooms now. So you guys starting in Tombstone and now you're in Pheonix and uh Jordan, are you guys working on another tap room? I
No,
know
no,
you're only at 3 years in, so you know.
we need one more,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I don't want to do it. It's so hard. But
That,
maybe one day.
that's fair. That's fair.
My
Uh
response is that I enjoy being married.
that's
Yeah.
fair. Yeah, that's fair. I did I don't want to say I crushed the that Pilsner, but I did make a really, really good effort on it. But I do want to jump into this Friday Junior because it was just sitting there and it was looking at me and I was like, I can't not drink this. Going from, you know, one beer that's see-through and another IPA that, is again crisp, has very similar colors, which is always I always find fascinating with, anytime that I educate people on beer, I'm like, can't always go off the color. And when you're doing like a flight of beer, these actually, if you have them sitting next to each other, they're very similar. But as soon as you get that nose, you know which one's the Pilsner and which one's the IPA. And I mean, this is exactly what again, just like the Pilsner, hazy, a little bit of haziness, a little citrusy, fruity. Got that nice bit. I know it's the West Coast, so it's kind of, but not as sweet, over sweet as some West Coast are. Um, but well, yeah, there's a lot of different hops in here that I would say that you don't traditionally see in a lot of, especially over here on the East Coast, with your Nectaron, your Superdelic, Luminosa, and then the Crush Cryo.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on there. What was kind of, I know this was one of your collabs as well. So what's kind of the story behind the Friday Junior IPA as well?
Yeah, so this is a collab with Resident Culture, and we've been fans of theirs for a really long time. They make amazing stuff, and they were visiting out here, and we had a friend of a friend, so they came to brew with us for a beer festival. And yeah, it is, Matt, that was a great story about your beer. Very interesting. This one is more simple, I think, but I think it's really funny to put them together of like old school Pilsner and then this super modern West Coast fruity West Coast IPA.
Yeah.
With just this ridiculous list of all the new sexy hops that as the owner, as the co-founder and the guy that pays the bills, I just see money of like, oh my God, you know. We just make a list of the most expensive hops that we could find is what this looks like to me. Um, but I'm big for the most part, our West Coast IPAs, I like dank in it, like more dank than
Yeah.
most people do. I kind of want it to smell like San Francisco, like Dolores Park, and that dank vibe. But this one here, so I don't brew, but I was a part of the conversation with Resident Culture, and it's just try something new when you do a collab, right? So it was, let's make it lean, let's make it super modern, and let's make it pretty fruity. Let's kind of pull out the dank that we usually put into our West Coast IPA, um, and just the crush, that just finally got a name. So people are really liking that hop for West Coast IPA. We use Luminosa a lot. We don't use Superdelic very much, so we're like, let's just try that. And a little bit of trial and error. We do know we know we like all of those hops. I'm sure they had a thought to how they blended it. I wasn't there for that decision, but this is clearly one of those we get to brew with Resident Culture, and that's awesome. So let's do something that we don't do very often. And
Yeah.
when it came out, we released this one with another IP at the same time. Very similar grain bill, just very different hop loads.
Mhm.
This one was so much better. It's just like they're the same beers, and just take this one and give me another of the other of this beer. So we were pretty stoked about how it turned out, and Resident Culture, I think they're brewing their version of it, the exact same recipe at their place. They're brewing it
Okay.
about right now, I think. So that'll be hitting our market because they do sell beer in Arizona. So we'll get to drink them side by side, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think that's always kind of fun as well as if different breweries can use the same recipe. Obviously, it'll probably taste the same, but I mean, It's
Yeah.
different equipment, different water. So, there
Different
will
lots
be.
of all those hops,
Yeah, yeah,
we're
yeah.
not using the same, we're using the same named hops, but it's completely
But
different. We're not sharing lots or anything like that. So
no,
it'll
no,
be
yeah.
their versions of all these hops.
Yeah, and then kind of like when during the pandemic, you had the Curtain Up kind of series that went around for a little while, and the Black is Beautiful, and where it was same recipe for the most part, but then everyone would kind of did their little tweaks, and it was always kind of fun to kind of see kind of those different flavors. So I think it'll be kind of fun for at least for anyone in the Phoenix market once that beer hits to kind of drink these side by side to kind of see the difference with it. But also I think just having that access to kind of these newer, as you said, these newer sexy hops, the fun, and especially like cryo hops, which are making a little bit more of a wave lately. Where I see a few of, I've seen a few here and there, but they haven't. It was thought that they were going to be like the new wave of like this is the new way to do hops because you do get a much more bolder flavor through the freezing process. But it also the process is a little more extensive, and so not as many have hit. But it does help, I think, specifically with a West Coast style. I think a cryo hop is kind of not key, but is definitely way more helpful with it. Because especially if I think of like a West Coast, um, I do think of dank. I think of, that it's like bold and earthy, and you want that like spring or summertime, like in a glass, but like you just want pine and but with a little bit of a sweetness. This is not that. If I did a blind tasting, I would say that I'd be like, is this a West Coast? Is this a New England? Is it, but it does have like, it has, you're getting all the hops, but you're not getting the burn that you get with a lot of those high
Yeah.
resin hops,
It's
which
very
is what
gentle on the
is
bitterness.
very gentle on
And
the
it does
bitter.
smell like a hazy. It's a whole thing, but it
It's
is very delicious.
yeah, yeah.
We're
And
not going to enter it in a competition, not because it's not good, but it will not fit into a category.
no, 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 no. I think that's the kind of the fun thing that I didn't do this on purpose because I haven't had these beers before, but we have two very traditional styles of beers that are not traditional in their sense. So we have like that classic Pilsner. We don't know where to put this in that Pilsner category, right? And then same with this one as a West Coast, but then it kind of again, if you were to do a blind tasting, it kind of would kind of hit kind of like is it West Coast? Is it hazy? Is it American? Is it where does it kind of fall in there? Which I think is kind of exciting and where we can have all these traditional styles, and I think that's where sometimes the system, the especially like the BJCP kind of fails us a little bit, is that one, they don't update it for every like 3 to 5 years, right? And then on top of that, it has the now because there can be so many variations within each category, it's very vague of like where does this actually fit? But I think like with that, where do you guys kind of see kind of either your markets, your breweries, or the styles kind of venture off as things are continuing to kind of evolve and expand? That's
Yeah.
a loaded question, so take time.
No, yeah, I'll go first. I see Matt's muted, so I'll jump in anyway. Yeah, style wise, we brew for flavor, and we brew for what's fun and what people want. But we take the competitions pretty seriously as well. When GABF comes or when World Beer Cup is coming, we do brew beer specifically to go into those competitions um and try to do our best. But IPA range, I don't think we even think about what this is. We're brewing a hazy or we're brewing a West Coast or whatever, but we're not trying to follow any sort of guidelines there. But the brewers, and I'm not a brewer, but we have three great guys back there. When they get to brew, you know, we have three 7 barrel tanks, which are pretty small.
Yeah.
We can sell it out of the tap room. So every now and then, we'll just give them free range. And when they get to brew a lager back there, Czech lager, German lager, American Pils, or dark lager, Vienna lager, or something like that. They take that very seriously, and not for, I don't think anybody cares, to be honest. Whether I don't know how many people we have in our tap room drinking it, whether deciding whether or not they think it's true to style, but our brewers care,
Yeah.
and we love that they care.
Yeah, and I mean that's important, right? That's like as we were talking earlier. It's like hopefully you care about your own beer, right? Like you want to care that you're making something, that's delicious and thoughtful. And sometimes people like it and sometimes
Yeah, I
it
mean the
is, but
IPA, like there's an IPA that has won New Zealand IPA at GABF and World Beer Cup, and they don't use New Zealand hops. You can look it up. It's not hard to figure out which one I'm referring to. But so you get to these styles, and it's kind of like, especially in the IPA realm, if people are just drinking it behind the tap room, just call it a hazy or call it a West Coast, whether or not it's hazy or clear, and I think we'll do okay.
yeah, nice. And that,
Yeah, we had played around a little bit in the very beginning with competitions. We haven't done much recently. Um, a lot of it is it's and I come from a background as a home brewer and a BJCP judge. So like after, a decade of BJCP stuff, like I was really into the idea of competing the beers. And, the head brewer who's still the head brewer, he's much less so. He's more interested in like viewing it almost like a chef, where it's like to enter something you have to have criteria, and that means you have to stick to the guidelines that you're supposed to follow, and that just doesn't make sense for him. And our pilot system is 15 barrels, our biggest system is 15 barrels. Like that's what we're making, right? Like there's no in between, so it's like we're stuck with 400 something gallons, right? Like that's gonna happen. So yeah, I would love to do more, honestly, but it's also a challenge. When we did enter them initially, when I just pushed the issue, it was more gaming the system than it seemed to be worth, because it was similar to what I did as a home brewer, right? Where it's like we realized that a dunkel, like you wouldn't your dunkel would never win as a dunkel, but it would always win as an amber lager. So it's like you always enter one category down, right? Your 7.7% IPA did great as an IPA, but it's probably more like a double. And your triple probably did better as a double, right? So it's like you've got all these people doing things that aren't quite, like us included, doing things that aren't really what it is, right? Because people aren't looking for subtlety. And if you're judging 20 beers, you get palate fatigue, you get all sorts of other things. And like if you have something that just beats you over the head with something in a good way, like you can't compete with that, even though that's sort of not the, I don't know, platonic ideal. I think that's a term. But yeah,
sure.
it's a challenge to try to do those. We've done less. We're hoping to do more. Like I don't know. I think it's been 4 or 5 years since we entered anything in GABF or World Beer Cup, but
Yep.
we I mean I would like to, because I think it's, I see value in it. And even if it's arbitrary and sort of gaming the system, at the very end, like at least you get somebody drinking your beer and writing about it.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and even if you take it back to the this Pilsner that's named after a beer magazine, like it was written what 100 years ago or whatever, and you're making a beer based off of that. So who knows what's gonna happen in 100 years with like somebody grading it and it's like, oh hey, I wonder what happened in that 2024. What beer won in the Pilsner category, and then kind of we don't know, we don't know what's gonna happen, and so it is interesting to be able to have them recognized. And obviously, from a business perspective, it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of a clout of be able to, hey, like this beer won, even if it's bronze, like still won, it's still gotten like the top three of either the JBF or the World Beer Cup. And so it does obviously help with that. But I do understand kind of it is because there are so many regulations and stipulations of like what the styles are when you are just brewing with the heart of it, then it's like, if you look, Jordan, like your brewers, they're just like, I want to make a good beer. I want to make this is what we're doing. And then Matt is like, your brewer's he's like a chef. He's like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And let's see, kind of going with it with like the feeling of it. And obviously there's still a lot of science behind and involved. But it is kind of hard to recreate that sometimes, or even, as a home brewer myself, sometimes to be able to like, oh, yeah, I forgot to write that I did 2.5 ounces of that versus this, and sometimes to be able to recreate that is going to be difficult. But I guess then to that point, kind of how many of your beers are kind of for both of you guys are recreated regularly, and how many times do you guys just do kind of like one-offs?
We have 4 cores. So hazy, West Coast, a like a quick sour, and the American Pilsner. Um, so those are made year round. We're not in a ton of places, but we're gonna be in Sprouts pretty soon and Whole Foods. So we go to those places, and then one-offs almost weekly. We have a new one. I mean, bi-weekly for sure, and it's usually any of those styles. We have some sort of IPA, probably 2 a month, probably a lager, and then maybe something else, maybe a saison, maybe some sort of sour. But yeah, that's pretty much our schedule. And then yeah, like I said, getting into more of the Imperial Stout game this weekend.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we run like sort of tiers of corness, if that makes sense, where our flagship IPA is always available. I think there's like 400 places in Arizona that sell it. Um, Good Enough Blonde is sort of similar, like probably about half as many accounts, but permanent handles everywhere. And then we have a Raspberry Berliner that's always available. And then we have lots of sort of one-offs that we maybe make once a quarter or once every 4 months, about that frequency. And that's like, those are sort of like, those would be like the Golden Eagle, the one of the ones that um one of the ones that was in the bunch
In the box,
of
yeah.
the, like, this Miner's Mild is like almost always available. Like, they aren't like super strong sellers like for mass market appeal, but we have accounts that always have them. And then Little Baby Wyatt, our session IPA, that's one of them. There's just several of them like that that we sort of, so it's like the top ones are the Good Enough, the IPA and the Raspberry. And then there's other ones that if an account wants a permanent tap and they're going to print a menu for the year, we can at least make enough for them to be able to do that. And then, I mean, other than that, like sort of the same as you guys, like every other week, we are distributed. So every other week, the distributor in Pheonix, and then the every other week in Tombstone, they're picking up stuff. And almost always there's sometimes between never no one-offs and never more than 3. So like, I mean, we've made 500 different beers in 8 years.
That's
So
that's impressive.
yeah, it's a lot of different beers. And a lot of it's just riffs on the same thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
we just, we wanted to try crush hops. Like, it seemed like a really cool new hop variety. So it's like, hell yeah, let's try it. That sounds amazing. So we did that. And then we got a sudden source for like a really awesome lot of citradelic or superdelic. So we did a superdelic, beer. Same thing with Nectarome. Like, another awesome brewery down here in Wilcox has a huge contract for Nectarone, and their flagship is a Nectarone beer. It's Torito Farms. It's a great beer. It's awesome. And we were like, well, hell yeah, can we buy some of that Nectarone from you guys? And they were kind enough to give it to us. So we, sell it to us, but we made it, and it was awesome. Like, and so it's like stuff like that where it's like you get excited, you do the one off, but then like for us, there are several cores we want, and it's also different in different markets because we have one distributor for down here and one for the rest of the state. And so what sells here is totally different from what sells in Phoenix and Tucson.
Yeah.
So
Nice. No. That's really cool.
Or you can
And
just be like us and put all of the hops you just mentioned into one beer, which is what
That's
they're
a cool
drinking right
which is
now.
what we're drinking right
Yeah,
now, and
yeah.
it's
All
fantastic.
every hop you just mentioned is in that beer you're drinking.
And I am curious with the hops because you guys are a little bit further west than we are in New York. But are you guys getting hops um anywhere in Arizona, or is it all, I mean, obviously the climate's not ideal in Arizona for hop growing. But are you guys, is there anyone that provides local hops? Or are you guys getting them all from kind of the Oregon, California area, Washington, Yakima?
All the Pacific Northwest or New
Yeah,
Zealand.
yeah.
We tried it this year. We were a week early. Another brewery or two did it, but so if you drive north from Phoenix, people don't really know this, but we're at 1,000 feet elevation. You can drive 2 hours and you can be at 7,000 feet elevation in Flagstaff, where it just
Yeah,
snowed yesterday, and
yeah.
it's 80 here. Between those two, pretty much, the wild hops do grow. So a
Okay.
lot of people, not a lot of people, a few breweries do go up there and forage and make a saison or something with it. We tried to do it this year and our truck broke down, so we were not able to do it. But next year maybe.
So we've done it a few times.
Yeah.
So where we are, you can grow hops. So Tombstone's at 4,500 feet.
There you go.
There are hop farms, like nothing at like a big commercial scale, but there are hop growers in Sonoyta. There are hop growers in Wilcox that you can grow them in Tombstone. So we've done beers with them several times. Like we had one lady who her and her husband thought it would be really cool to just run cables from their roof down to their garden beds and just grow hops up the side of their house. And they were yielding, I mean, their entire year crop was enough in the first year for us to Randall for one beer to do like a fresh hop Randall off the taps. And then the second year when they planted the rest of their house full of it, it was enough for us to do a fresh hop saison, like where we did a mixed firm sour with a bunch of fresh hops. And that was it's been cool. It's nothing really like commercially big.
Yeah.
And so for us, it's like, we have contracts for hops, a mix of Yakima, our Oregon lots, one of our flagships that's almost always available, like sort of that second tier of core beers where it's in Sprouts, it's in, places like that. But it's not like we're not leaning into that brand. Like that one uses all Oregon lots we selected. We do a lot of Michigan hops actually. Like
Okay.
Michigan Chinook is so good, it tastes like pineapple. And there's a particular grower. So it's like a lot of lot selected stuff, but we've tried the Arizona, it's just nobody's at scale.
Yeah.
We did a collaboration with Rowley out of Santa Fe, and we did spontaneously fermented sour, and we used aged hops that were grown by local farmers,
That's
which
cool.
which was super cool. Spontaneously fermented with the microbes in the air, and then on top of that using a using hops grown in the same air.
Nice. No, that's super cool. And I think that's something that a lot of people like. When you think of Arizona, you do think of just the desert. You'd think of flat, but there is a lot of variable. Like it does actually snow, and there is actual variation in elevation. And so it is cool to, know that even though you can't be like go to like a hop farm per se to like for myself or other brewers, but you guys are able to have access to those hops to be able to brew some Arizona beers and Arizona hop beers, which is going to provide a unique flavor and element to, that experimentation that you guys are kind of going for with all your different styles as well, and to kind of have that fun and that freedom with it as well. Now, as
There's
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to hijack it one more time. And there is a
Do it.
native hop variety that grows in the Sky Islands down here, but nobody grows it. It's a wild hop. So
Oh,
it's
nice.
Neo-Mexicanus. It
Okay.
has to be foraged, but it grows in the Sky Islands down here. So they call them Sky Islands. It's mountains because it's desert on the floor, and then you grow up to the tree line, But yeah, in those mountain ranges, there are wild hops, and Neo Mexicanus is the variety, and it's actually got a pretty cool flavor profile.
Jordan, is that the one that you guys were going to harvest?
I don't know if we know we're going to harvest. I don't know if it's the same one or not. I'll let you know next year when we actually get there.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we'll circle back in a year
Yeah.
and see. We'll check in and see if it was that specific style. And I do know that there are areas like even here in like in New York and other places where wild hops do actually do grow and do well. So it is kind of cool to know that it's you can grab them and use them. But obviously foraging wild hops is going to be maybe not the most time, you know, well use of time for a beer or most cost effective to be able to get enough volume to be able to brew a batch. But if you do like a small one-off, on like a 3 barrel one-off, maybe, but 15 barrel, that might be a little time extensive to harvest all of those. And I did want to circle back to one question, which I know you did mention in the chat, Jordan, but someone was asking about the name of the beer of the Friday Juniors. I know it is connected with Blink 182. I'm just curious, is it because it is named after, all the small things? Is that because there's so many hops in there?
No, he's talking about the name of the brewery.
Oh, the name of the brew. Oh, Rosa by the Stairs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
so circling back to kind of we were talking about earlier, the long name of the Pilsner and how it gets shortened on many untapped menu boards. So does the name of our brewery,
Yeah.
which I did not plan for. Um, yeah, I mean, when I was trying to come up, me and my wife were trying to come up with a name of the brewery, just didn't really know. Didn't want to be what road you were on or anything like that or what corner. And I had a friend who named their rock climbing gym after a lyric in a song. It's
Okay.
not OAR song or something like that. So I'm just a big Blink 182 fan. So I was just throwing stuff at my wife one night, and she was like, "No, that's stupid. No, that's stupid. No, that's stupid. Nope, nope, nope." And I just said "Roses by the Stairs," and she was like, "That's not so bad." And then we never came up with anything better. So yeah, it's from the All the Small Things song. But it's kind of fun. It annoyed me for a while because we just get the question so often in the
Yeah.
tap room. It doesn't really annoy me, but it annoys the bartenders, actually. I don't care. Um, but now we've been doing some really cool stuff with, I don't know if you Google some of our, like our doubles and our triples that we come out with now. My wife does all the branding and we'll do doubles and triples that are like pop punk album themed. So we did a
Yeah.
Green Day, American Idiot one. That one's the best one. If you just Google the can, it gets the album cover. We did Bleed American from Jimmy Eat World and things like that. So it's become a little bit of a marketing tool, which is nice.
Yeah. No, and I think that is, it did catch me as well the first time I saw the name because I've known the name for a while because I see it and I have a buddy that he's had your stouts a couple times and is always a huge fan. And I've had your beer before and it's like, oh, Roses by the Stairs. It's like I never caught it that it was the same song, but it was that grain in there of like, I know this, but why do I know
Yeah. Yeah.
this?
Well, I
Kind of
named
thing.
it too, like we named it that when Blink 182 was broken up. They
Oh,
weren't,
yeah.
they hated each other. No one ever thought they would play together. So I was like, oh, this will be a niche thing. And then they got back together and now they're world touring, which has helped us
Yeah,
touring.
yeah.
But I can't say I'm that smart to know that Blink was going to get back together and I was going to try and ride the wave with them or something. That was just a nice
Well,
thing.
now you can say that you were planning on it, that like your brewery is what brought them back together.
Probably,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
Or
That
maybe yeah. But yeah, definitely. And then a lot of people too, like, do you know them? Or you're like brothers with one of the guys? Like, nope, we've never met them. They don't even know we exist. So
yeah. And have you, because sometimes, with I feel like with song lyrics, you're not really going to run into that. But have you guys ran into any like cease and desist kind of things with any of that, or like, or people just don't care?
people don't care.
Yeah, there you
And
go.
we're so small.
Yeah.
It's a 15-barrel batch. It's gone before anybody can get mad, I
Perfect.
think.
You know,
Yeah.
we've tended to push the copyright thing a little bit. And we did one that was called Passenger Side, which was a Wilco song. And we got like an email from Wilco asking if we could mail a case so they could have it at their studio in Chicago.
I mean, that's pretty cool.
It was the coolest thing that could have possibly happened with
Yeah,
that.
because
Yeah,
that
we
could have
had.
been a very different email of, hey, can
I
you
just think most
not?
of these bands, like
They don't
they'd be
care.
so weird to get
Yeah,
mad at a local brewery. That's not. I don't know. If you're doing a core or something and you're trying to go nationwide, maybe they'll get mad. But you're just trying to sell like $1,000 worth of beer in your local
yeah.
town. I don't know.
Well, and with you guys, you're not doing major distribution. You guys are sticking pretty much, to your state. So like, yeah, it's probably not really gonna be a huge impact. But I
Yeah.
think that is cool that they're like, hey, can you actually just send us beer? Can you just send it to us? Because and hey, who knows? Maybe Green Day will ask you guys for some beer coming up.
Been trying. I tag Green Day and Yellow Card and Blink in every post, but they don't seem to care.
Well, then, and love the kind of the difference that's happening, with also with having both of you guys on here is that, we've got kind of the new, Roses by the Stairs named after, a lyric on a song. And then Tombstone is literally just because you're in Tombstone. Is that just Tombstone Brewing because of it started in Tombstone, Matt? Is that as
It
simple?
was a complete lack of creativity.
I would say there's
Um,
is full creativity in there. And then do you guys do because obviously there's a lot of history in Tombstone, right? And I mean, my first thought, I grew up watching the movie Tombstone, which it's a great movie. But with that, with the history of Wyatt Earp and OK Corral, do you guys ever lean into any of that? I know with some of your beers, you've got the history of this one. I know the Golden Eagle is named after the local mine. You
yeah,
guys
so
stick
Golden
to
Eagle's
that?
named after the first brewery in Tombstone.
There you
So there've been like nearly a dozen breweries in Tombstone, but most of them were in the 19th century.
go.
Um, like almost, I don't know if there was a single one in the 20th century, actually.
That's crazy.
So it would all be in the 21st or the 19th. But yeah, so like the Golden Eagle that's named after the first brewery in Tombstone, and it's suspiciously similar to Yingling, given that Yingling was selling in Tombstone in the 1880s. So that's sort of what that is, where it's just like a copper style lager. You know, Tombstone would have been a German lager town. Bisbee was an ale town. That's why Miner's Mild has the Bisbee branding.
Yeah.
But yeah, the we do a ton of that stuff. So like the Good Enough, like our flagship blonde, Good Enough was one of the mines, right? Like they said, it was good enough, and ironically, was hugely productive. Same thing with like Lucky Cuss is one of our loggers that we have frequently. That's Lucky Cuss was another mine because the guy who struck it, everyone told him he was a Lucky Cuss. For St. Patty's Day, we've got two beers coming out. One of them is John Riley's Dry Irish Stout. John Riley was the guy who ran a hog ranch, which is a name for a brothel next to a military base that is on the site where our Sierra Vista Brewery was, and he killed two patrons to keep the peace, was acquitted in both jury trials. So yeah, John Riley's Irish Stout, and then we named our Irish Red that's getting released for St. Patty's Day is named Irish Mag, which in Bisbee, the first productive mine was named for a guy's favorite prostitute who had a parrot that the miners taught how to swear, and her name was Irish Mag. So she had a parrot on her shoulder. Miners taught the parrot how to swear. One guy loved her so much that he named his mine the Irish Mag, and it was like the first multi-million-dollar successful mine out of Bisbee. So like we really lean into that with a lot of these beers, and like the photographs, like if you look at the Miner's Mild can, like those are authentic photographs of people in our county and in our region. And yeah, there's probably, I would say, about a third to maybe as much as half of all of our names have some sort of historical tradition significance for like the mining history and just the general history of the area.
Nice. No, and I think that's kind of the fun thing about kind of the brewing industry as a whole is that you can have two breweries, you know, completely different starts, completely different, you know, one's going, you know, Jordan, you guys are kind of going more of that pop culture kind of reference rock, you know, music, and then Matt, you guys are going history, but you both are like, hey, let's just make really good beer, and let's just make beer that we like, right? And let's try this, let's try that, and let's put all the hops in there, and you know, kind of going it in the same way, but still, you know, it's kind of that full circle of we're gonna kind of do these in a different, on the surface, you're very different, but really the heart of it is making good beer and getting good beer out there, which is kind of awesome. Which is they're both the beers that we're having tonight are fantastic, very, very different, but very, very good as well. And I know that, you know, the history of the, you know, Tombstone, you guys have been around, you know, you guys testament that you're around for a long time. And Jordan, I know you guys will be as well. You've made it, you made it 2.5 years. Like, what's another 25, right? And so you just keep going. But as things are moving kind of forward, and you know, we are going to wrap this up here in just a minute as well. But kind of, is there anything kind of plans for the future for either of you of like what's the next step, or you know, is there anything that kind of like you want to plug that, you know, get people coming to you guys to look forward to in the near or distant future?
Sure, Matt, you want to start?
Yeah, so I mean, on our end, we're really hoping to revive a lot of our sour program. That's a huge thing that like we really went nuts with that, and the market seemed to fall apart. Like we've got dozens, if not over 100 barrels of spontaneously fermented sours, aged some as many as 8 years. So like the idea of us doing these beers where it's like, I mean, we could make a goose, but instead of a 1 year, a 2 year, and a 3 year, we could make it with 8 consecutive years. I mean, we've got an interesting spontaneous, and they're good, like, which is what's crazy to me, where it's like, so, but that's one of those things where it's like we thought that was the market, and they're not getting worse, like, right, like they taste great. So it's like we really want to do that. I think for us, it's more a matter of like leaning into the artisan stuff, like really focusing on these special releases and more of our on-site, as there's like sort of a broader uncertainty right now with regard to canning. You know, 50% of our production is cans not sold at our breweries.
Yeah.
So the idea of not knowing what that cost is going to be, the idea of hopefully bringing more people to the breweries and focusing on these sort of specialty things that we've been doing all along, but it's never been like the main focus. I think that's most of where we're going, where we want to keep doing the artisan lagers, we want to keep doing the hazies, we want to keep exploring the new ingredients, but we also really want to lean into like there's never been a better time to want barrels, like to find interesting whiskeys, to find interesting spirits that you might not even know about. Like there's just so much cool stuff. I mean, people are bourbon barrel aging vanilla beans, right? Like, so the idea of like getting a vanilla bourbon barrel is like awesome. Those are delicious. We've done a couple of those. So it's like just, yeah, just enjoying the ingredients available, leaning into the artisan side of it, and not worrying too much about the price of cans.
Nice.
So
Yeah, well, I think the first thing, it was cool to hear kind of some of the backstory of what Tombstone is doing, because I see all their beers, but you know, I see the names, but it's cool to hear the backstory and all that. And I think we should probably do a collab pretty soon. Maybe going into the summer, we should brew
100% on
something.
board.
Okay, cool. We should do something
You're
together.
welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think for us, I mean, we're still pretty young, but the one thing that we're pretty proud of is we are Arizona's only 1% for the planet brewery. Pretty sure that still stands. At least it was as of last year. Meaning we give 1% of our revenue to local nonprofits to fight climate change. And in a time where you're 2 years old, sometimes you don't make money in a month. So you do give 1% of your revenue, even when it's not, even when that bottom line is negative at the same time. Um, so for me, I don't know, it's growing the business in that way, growing the business so we can donate more money to help the planet and help our state. So we can pay our people more, so we can fund 401ks one day, so we can continue to provide healthcare. We're at that stage of the business now where it's growth, but it's slow growth, so we can grow a business that we're proud of and that people like to work at.
That's cool. I mean, I think that's the, obviously that's the hope for, all breweries, that to just be able to make a difference, again, provide great beer and provide a place that people not only want to come and visit, but want to be a part of, partner with, and be, work at as
Yeah,
well.
it's important to
And
keep people around. I mean, that's why Tombstone makes such great beer. I mean, your guy's been there for how long? Matt, he's been your head brewer for as long as I've known, right?
Oh, Weedy?
Yeah,
Yeah, Weedy
we
was our first beers were brewed by Weedy.
yeah. So that's
Yeah.
you don't make good beer if your people are rotating constantly.
right. Yeah. So, and I think that's kind of that the legacy that, you know, again, people may not know Arizona or the Pheonix or Tombstone as a beer place, but hopefully, with the help of, you know, us and everyone that's listening and kind of getting the word out of like bringing people to coming to you guys to not only enjoying the desert. Maybe people aren't going to come in the 115-degree days, but maybe 100 100 degrees, 90 degrees. But have people come to your tap rooms, keep those businesses, and spreading the word to get, build that industry and build that, the community that you guys do have there, to just keep making amazing beer. And it's and I know we've ran tours there, and Key, I think they're still running there right now. And so, as things are continuing to progress, um, I mean, if anything, just cheers to you guys to keep going, and keep making great beer. And I know I'm looking forward to not only your collab, but also, future beers, some of those stouts, some of those wilds, and the sours, more lists that may not even fit entirely on a can of hops going into all those beers. And just seeing what you guys are going to be doing in the future as well. So I think with that, we're gonna say cheers and good night. And thank you guys so much for jumping on, for talking. We we lost track of time, but that's what I warned you. That's a possibility. And so with that, thank you guys once again for jumping on, talking about and providing all these amazing beers for us and for our guests and for all of our listeners. Again, if you want to have some amazing beer, obviously you can, make sure that you're getting the box, but also go to shop.citybrewtours.com, get more beer from more cities, and we're gonna do it again next month and get more beer and have another good time. And so, cheers, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
All
Yeah, thank
right.
you.
Thank you guys. All
Good
right.
night.
Have a good night.